Over the years, we've heard countless stories about the Trump family, but one daughter has remained almost completely silent, Tiffany Trump. Unlike her siblings, she kept herself far away from the storm of politics, choosing a quieter life, at least until now. Recently, Tiffany has spoken out about her father, Donald Trump, and what she revealed is far from the usual praise and admiration he often receives. For some, her words came as a shock, but the real question is why now? And what exactly did she say that caught the world's attention? Stay with me because by the end of this story, you may be stunned, you may agree completely, or you may be left wondering why. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. This story goes much deeper than it seems. Tiffany grew up in California, the only child from the marriage between Marla Maples and Donald Trump, who tied the knot in 1993 but divorced in 1999. Their breakup was splashed across the headlines, a media storm that left Marla to start over with young Tiffany in Calabasas, California. Life there could not have been more different from the glittering, fast-paced world of Tiffany's half-siblings in New York. While Donald's older children grew up in Manhattan surrounded by skyscrapers, billion-dollar deals, and the relentless energy of their father's empire, Tiffany's childhood belonged to another world entirely. Picture this, a spacious home with a wide backyard, a trampoline, and quiet days spent in the California sun. It was a life that reminded Marla of her own southern roots in Georgia. If New York symbolized ambition, and steel Calabasas represented fresh air, calm, and simplicity. And that was exactly the childhood Marla dreamed of giving her daughter. Through it all, Tiffany stayed silent, perhaps too silent. During her father's presidency and the controversies that followed, she rarely stepped into the spotlight content to remain in the background. But now she has spoken, breaking that silence with a statement that could forever alter the way the world sees Donald Trump. What did she reveal, and why does it cut so deep? This you will want to hear. Marla didn't just raise Tiffany, she made it her mission to give her daughter something priceless, a normal whole childhood. You know how so many celebrity kids grow up in a bubble, completely detached from reality? Marla was determined Tiffany would never fall into that trap. She worked tirelessly not only to create calm around her daughter, but to build a life that was warm, balanced, and truly healthy. Their everyday routines were simple but intentional. 5 nights a week meant home-cooked organic dinners, no exceptions. Tiffany played tennis, spent hours outdoors, and stayed active again, no exceptions. There were even humanitarian trips to places like Malawi, where Tiffany learned firsthand that life was so much bigger than privilege. And of course, there were their special mother-daughter traditions like cozy movie nights that created a bond that time itself couldn't break. Tiffany's childhood was gentler than that of her Trump siblings. But let's be clear, it was not without privilege. She attended the elite Viewpoint School with tuition running nearly $30,000 a year, hardly an ordinary high school experience. Still, Marla fought to keep Tiffany's life grounded, even as she brushed shoulders with circles of immense wealth and influence. Marla's goal was crystal clear. She wanted Tiffany to discover who she was, not just live as Donald Trump's daughter. And Tiffany understood that. In her own words, "My mom took us out of New York to get me away from the spotlight so I could grow up and find my own identity instead of living in the shadow of a name." By design, Marla gave Tiffany room to grow beyond her father's larger-than-life presence. Don't get the wrong idea, Tiffany and her father were never estranged. Even though she grew up across the country, she maintained a relationship with Donald. But it wasn't the kind of bond built on every weekend visits. Their time together was planned deliberate. Tiffany would travel to New York, stay at Trump Tower, share meals with her father and Melania, and catch glimpses of her half-siblings' fast-paced Manhattan lives. To his credit, Donald did show up for the big moments. School events, award ceremonies, milestones, he often flew out to California just to be there. Of course, with his relentless schedule, he couldn't be present for the smaller everyday things. But Marla worked hard to keep father and daughter connected despite the distance. What's remarkable is how carefully Marla handled this balance. She never let her personal feelings toward Donald interfere with Tiffany's bond with him. And honestly, that's impressive. Divorces can so easily turn toxic. But not here. She never badmouthed him, never pushed her own judgments onto Tiffany. As Marla once admitted, she had a father who provided well for her education and everything, but when it came to the day-to-day, it was just me. It was a quiet acknowledgement that while Donald handled the finances, she was the one raising Tiffany moment by moment. Yet despite the distance and the different worlds they lived in, Marla made sure Tiffany had the freedom to shape her own perspective of her father. I just felt it was important that she build her own relationship with him without me interfering. Marla once explained, and truthfully, that might be one of the healthiest approaches to co-parenting you could ever hope for in a situation like theirs. So year after year, holiday after holiday, Tiffany divided her time, half of it spent in the quiet rhythm of life on the West Coast, with her mother and the other half inside the whirlwind of Trump Tower in Mar-a-Lago. It was without question a unique kind of childhood. While Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric were raised completely immersed in the machinery of their father's brand, Tiffany's story unfolded very differently. Hers was a world where independence, self-discovery, and the pursuit of something resembling normal life mattered more than power and legacy. And for that, she had Marla Maples to thank, a mother who willingly stepped out of the spotlight so that her daughter could shine in her own way when she was truly ready. That moment came during the campaign. When Donald Trump's 2016 presidential run reached its peak, Tiffany suddenly found herself stepping into a world she had never truly belonged to before the public eye of politics, with its endless media attention and scrutiny. Unlike Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, who had been at the center of their father's business and public image for years, Tiffany had largely remained on the sidelines. But 2016 changed that. She began making carefully planned appearances, joining the campaign with a polished yet understated style. It was as though she had stepped into the picture, but entirely on her own terms. One of her earliest public moments came at a White House event for the Wounded Warrior Project. It wasn't a flashy, headline-grabbing occasion, and that was exactly the point. Tiffany wasn't trying to be the face of the campaign, nor was she delivering soaring political speeches. Instead, she quietly stood beside her father, showing her support in a deliberate but subtle way. It was clear Tiffany had found her rhythm, not aiming to become a political sensation, but also not retreating from the spotlight entirely. And if there was one thing people noticed about her during the campaign, it was her striking sense of fashion. On the surface, it may have seemed trivial. After all, campaigns aren't runways. But for Tiffany, her wardrobe became a subtle form of self-expression, a language of its own. She often turned to Chinese designer Taorei Wang, making his creations her signature look for pivotal moments. Tiffany wore Wang's designs to campaign debates, election night, and even the inauguration. It was a deliberate choice. While her siblings gravitated toward traditional American designers, Tiffany's wardrobe carried an international edge, blending elegance with just a touch of bold individuality. Perhaps it was simply her personal style, or maybe it was her way of carving out an identity within a family where even the choice of clothing could be seen as a political statement. Whatever the reason, it became her signature, and people undoubtedly noticed. Yet what the public couldn't see was that the campaign trail had given Tiffany something far more meaningful: precious time with her father. Before 2016, Tiffany's bond with Donald was distant compared to her siblings, largely because they grew up in different worlds. But during those endless flights and the constant shuffle from one rally stop to another, she and her father found rare private moments away from cameras, away from crowds, away from the relentless noise of politics. Then came the 2016 Republican National Convention. This was Tiffany's defining moment. For anyone who wondered where she fit within the Trump political dynasty, her speech was the answer. And she didn't try to become someone else. Unlike Don Jr., who delivered a fiery political rallying cry, or Ivanka, who polished her words like a corporate pitch, Tiffany chose to stay authentic. She spoke of how her father inspired her to strive for excellence, nurtured her growth, and carried a gift for drawing out the best in people. It was a softer, more intimate glimpse of the man behind the larger-than-life image. There were no aggressive talking points, no controversial sound bites, just a daughter speaking about her father. The approach was both strategic and deeply genuine. But by 2020, Tiffany's message had evolved. She was no longer merely paying tribute. She was stepping directly into the political arena. Her RNC speech that year urged voters to look beyond party lines and judge leaders by results, not rhetoric. She also took a sharp stance on media and technology, warning that people's opinions, thoughts, and even their votes were being manipulated in plain sight. This was not the same Tiffany from 4 years earlier. Whether it was growing comfort in the political spotlight or a stronger desire to assert her views, one thing was undeniable: she was no longer the quiet, stylish Trump daughter. She was speaking out. For years, Donald Trump's closeness to Ivanka, Eric, and Don Jr. was evident, while his bond with Tiffany remained a mystery. Finally, Tiffany began to reveal what truly unfolded behind closed doors, and what she shared was eye-opening. Could this be the turning point that reshaped everything within the Trump family life inside the presidency had just begun? The bond between Donald Trump and Tiffany has shifted dramatically over the years, especially during his presidency. At first, their relationship appeared steady, almost untouched by the political storm surrounding the family. But as time passed, a quiet distance grew between them. They still exchanged the occasional phone call, yet there were long stretches, sometimes entire months, when silence defined their connection. Tiffany's first meaningful step into Washington life came when she attended a Wounded Warrior Project event. It wasn't a grand debut, no dazzling speech, no headlines screaming her name. Instead, it was a quiet, almost humble appearance, simply showing up to support her father's initiatives. In many ways, that moment encapsulated her entire role during those years. She wasn't a political figure, not someone pushing policies or stirring controversy. Tiffany appeared when it mattered, but never sought constant attention. While her siblings stood in the spotlight at rallies and political stages, commanding crowds and delivering speeches, she was elsewhere, immersed in her law studies at Georgetown. That alone was a remarkable feat, pursuing her own ambitions while carrying the Trump name. Despite the relentless media gaze on her as the president's daughter, Tiffany carved out her own space separate from the political whirlwind consuming her family. But then in 2019, the spotlight found her in the harshest of ways. A White House aide, Madeleine Westerhout, carelessly made a cruel remark, hinting that Trump avoided being photographed with Tiffany because of her appearance. Imagine hearing something like that about your own father from someone within his inner circle. The media seized on it, exploding it into a scandal. Trump scrambled to contain the fallout, declaring publicly, "I love Tiffany." But the damage was already done. Fair or not, the incident left people questioning how close their bond truly was. Yet through it all, Tiffany continued to step forward when duty called. In 2020, she took the stage at the Republican National Convention once again. But this time, her tone was different. Gone were the warm, personal anecdotes she had shared in 2016. Instead, Tiffany delivered a sharper message, openly warning about media bias and manipulation. She condemned how the press shaped public opinion and urged people to think critically for themselves. It was her boldest, most unflinching stance yet. Unlike Ivanka, who often spoke of her father in a tender and personal way, Tiffany always chose a more formal tone. She didn't recount touching father-daughter stories, nor did she paint Donald Trump as the endlessly loving dad. Instead, her words stayed focused on his policies, and that in itself revealed more than it seemed. Though she wasn't always present in the White House, Tiffany still made time to be with her family when it truly mattered. She spent holidays at Mar-a-Lago, and even if she didn't constantly share family updates, Ivanka often made sure Tiffany appeared in social media posts about Trump gatherings. Clearly, Tiffany wasn't deeply invested in politics, but neither was she completely detached. She managed to show up while still keeping her independence intact. In a family where public loyalty often feels like a duty, Tiffany found a way to exist without being overexposed. That was no small achievement, especially with a surname that has always drawn relentless scrutiny. For years, she was the quietest Trump, deliberately stepping away from the spotlight as her father dominated the headlines. But now she has finally spoken out, and what she revealed about Donald Trump has set off a storm of speculation. What did she say, and why did it come as such a shock? This changed everything. It shifted the very perception of their relationship. For Tiffany, her bond with her father has always been one of the most intriguing dynamics in the Trump family. Unlike her siblings, who grew up deeply intertwined with their father's business empire and later his political world, Tiffany was raised at a deliberate distance from the public eye. Her mother, Marla Maples, gave her a quieter, more private childhood. But in 2024 and 2025, the narrative shifted in ways no one anticipated. With Ivanka retreating from politics and Eric, alongside Don Jr., doubling down on public loyalty, Tiffany began stepping into a new role, one that reflected both her love for her father and her desire to protect her own identity. It was a delicate balance, something difficult for anyone in a family so closely tied to power. Take the Republican convention in Milwaukee in early 2025, for example. What was expected to be just another political event, just another stage in the Trump brand machine, became something else entirely when Tiffany took her place on that stage. But that moment revealed something far deeper. As Tiffany walked toward her father, her face lit up with a gentle smile, her arms open, ready for an embrace. Yet something felt slightly off. Perhaps it was the awkward timing, perhaps the cameras that captured every flicker of expression, or perhaps it was the unspoken truth of their complicated past, now unfolding under the eyes of the world. Whatever it was, Tiffany handled it with grace. She steadied herself, quickly collected her emotions, and returned quietly to her seat beside her husband, Michael Boulos. That fleeting moment spoke volumes. It painted a portrait of a daughter who stood by her father, supportive, yet striving to carve out her own space in his world. And this was not just an isolated instant. Tiffany's increasing visibility within her father's political orbit had already stirred conversations. She delivered speeches at rallies, appeared at pivotal campaign events, and even gave an emotional address in Reading, Pennsylvania, where she declared, "Hello, we love you. We stand with you, and my father is here fighting for you, and he will never let you down." It was a bold statement, but what truly captivated people was not the words themselves. It was the sincerity in her voice. She wasn't reading a script. She wasn't improvising aimlessly. She was present, fully engaged, and deeply authentic. Whether at the Detroit Economic Club, where Trump proudly announced her pregnancy while praising her as an exceptional young woman, or at the Pittsburgh rally, where he openly reflected on the ways his children had supported him at different levels, Tiffany has begun to leave her own mark. Behind the scenes, insiders say that Trump's children, Tiffany included, have developed a growing trust in his current circle of political advisors like never before. This shift has created a more genuine, more relaxed bond between them. No longer were they simply characters in a political performance. They were beginning to explore what their relationship truly meant beyond the dazzling spotlight of a campaign. For Tiffany, this balance, supporting her father while remaining authentic, was never easy. But lately it seems she has begun to find her rhythm. At its core, this story is not just about politics or public appearances. It is about a daughter who spent years defining herself outside her father's shadow, slowly finding her way back to him on her own terms. And it is about a father who, beneath all the bravado and spectacle, seems to genuinely value the daughter who once stood quietly at the margins of his world. At its heart, this is the ever-changing truth about family, the way bonds evolve, priorities shift, and how in the end, what truly matters is rarely what makes the loudest noise. Tiffany Trump may never have been the boldest or the brightest star of the Trump family, and perhaps deep down that was exactly how she wished it to be. Yet one thing is undeniable: her relationship with her father has changed. And in a world where every move is watched, every silence interpreted, that quiet shift is something worth remembering. And so we reach the end of today's story. Thank you for being here, for watching and listening. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys ahead. And to keep exploring these untold chapters, simply click on the next video that's waiting for you on the screen. For years, whispers have circled around the Trump family, and one question always stood out. What was the real relationship between Tiffany Trump and her stepmother, Melania? Behind the smiles and stage photographs, was there genuine warmth? Or was it all a performance? Did Melania ever truly embrace Tiffany as her own? Or did an invisible wall always remain between them, polite but distant, elegant yet cold? These were the mysteries people debated in silence, half curious, half skeptical. And now at 31 years old, Tiffany herself has finally decided to break that silence. What she revealed wasn't just another family anecdote, it was something far more surprising, something that forces us to look at the Trump dynasty with fresh eyes. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. Because here's the truth: nothing in the Trump family is ever as simple as it seems. Their world has always been layered with contradictions, shiny on the outside, complicated within. Behind the wealth, the pageantry, the shimmering towers, and the glossy magazine covers, there are private struggles, hidden tensions, and untold stories. Tiffany's confession is one of those rare moments when the curtain is pulled back. And trust me, it's not at all what you'd expect. So grab your seat because the journey we're about to take doesn't follow the path you think it will. Tiffany's story begins differently from her siblings. Born on October 13th, 1993, at St. Mary's Hospital in West Palm Beach, Florida, she came into the world under unusual circumstances, arriving just 2 months before her parents, Donald Trump and Marla Maples, officially walked down the aisle. That detail alone speaks volumes. It foreshadowed a life that would never quite fit into the neat, polished mold that defined the rest of the Trump children. Tiffany's life was marked from the beginning by a sense of being set apart, shaped by dynamics her brothers and sister never had to face. But before we dive deeper, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. If you've already done it, thank you so much. Your support means more than words can say. Now let's return to the heart of the story. While Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric were raised in the center of New York City's glittering chaos, surrounded by skyscrapers, golden penthouses, private tutors, and constant grooming to step into their father's empire, Tiffany's childhood followed an entirely different rhythm. Her world was quieter, more private, almost sheltered, compared to the relentless pace of Manhattan. She didn't grow up in boardrooms or in the shadow of Trump Tower. Instead, Tiffany's early years unfolded in an atmosphere that felt softer, gentler, and at times even lonely. And it was in this contrast between her path and that of her siblings that the seeds of her unique story began to take root. When Donald and Marla divorced in 1999, Marla made a life-changing decision. She moved Tiffany across the country to California. Why? To give her daughter distance from the chaos and constant pressure of being a Trump, to offer her something resembling a normal childhood, even if her last name was anything but ordinary. Over the years, endless speculation swirled. How did Tiffany really get along with Melania? Were they warm to one another? Or was there a quiet strain hidden beneath the public smiles? Now, after years of silence, Tiffany is finally finding her own voice. For so long, she has lived under the shadow of her powerful family name, surrounded by whispers, speculation, and endless headlines that painted her life in ways that were rarely her own. But today feels different. Today, Tiffany speaks not through rumors or secondhand accounts, but with her own words, her own truth. And before anyone rushes to judge or leap to conclusions, it is important, no essential, that we listen closely to what she is actually saying. Because the truth as she reveals it is far more layered, emotional, and complicated than the shallow rumors ever allowed us to believe. Behind the headlines lies a woman who has grown, who has struggled, and who has finally decided that it is time to set the record straight once and for all. Unlike her siblings who grew up in Trump Tower under the constant gaze of security guards and paparazzi, Tiffany's world in Calabasas, California, looked entirely different. It was filled with backyard trampolines, organic home-cooked meals, and cozy nights watching Gilmore Girls with her mom. Sounds like a completely different universe compared to the high-stakes business environment her siblings were immersed in. Right, Tiffany attended the prestigious Viewpoint School, where tuition soared above $30,000 and $1,000 a year. So no, her childhood wasn't exactly ordinary, but it was worlds apart from the glittering spectacle of New York. Through it all, Marla dedicated herself to raising Tiffany as a single devoted mother. She even chose to remain single for years, telling those around her that nothing and no one would ever come between her and Tiffany. Their bond became everything. Friends often said the two were closer than mother and daughter, more like best friends navigating life together. Meanwhile, her half-siblings were busy learning the ropes of their father's empire in Manhattan, while Tiffany's world revolved around deep conversations with her mom in California. But here lies the challenge. Living far from her father also meant she saw him far less than her brothers and sister. And that distance over time shaped not only her childhood, but also the way the world would later perceive her place within the Trump family. Of course, Donald Trump provided financial security. He made sure Tiffany had the best education, access to every essential need, and the privileges that came with his name. But when it came to presence, when it came to the kind of everyday attention and emotional care a child craves, that was almost entirely Marla's role. Tiffany did spend spring breaks at Mar-a-Lago Donald's Gilded Resort in Florida, and from time to time he would fly to California to attend a school event. But unlike his children on the East Coast, his presence in Tiffany's daily life was far from constant. Marla herself put it bluntly, Donald was a generous provider when it came to education and material things, but when it came to time, it was just her. That says it all, she admitted a simple yet powerful truth. Still, when Melania entered the picture, while Tiffany was still a little girl, Marla made a conscious effort to encourage warmth between Tiffany and her stepmother. She would even bring Tiffany to New York several times a year, arranging dinners with Donald and Melania so that a natural sense of family could slowly grow. Even so, Tiffany never truly grew up inside the Trump family bubble. She wasn't a fixture at business galas. She wasn't swept into the constant swirl of social events and photo ops. She stood apart. Tiffany herself has been candid about this difference. Back in 2013, during an interview with Oprah, she admitted growing up on the West Coast, "I'm definitely different from all the people who were raised on the East Coast." And even that, she said, was putting it mildly. While her siblings were being groomed to step into the world of business, trained to handle high-stakes events, and given early roles within their father's empire, Tiffany was simply allowed to live her own life. No company pressures, no daily news headlines, no expectation of inheriting the Trump legacy. Because of this, Tiffany was often seen as the outsider within the family. One insider once admitted that she never really grew up as part of the Trump household and didn't enjoy the same privileges as her half-siblings. And it shows. While Ivanka was deeply entrenched in the Trump organization, and later the White House, Tiffany was off living her own path, studying, spending time with friends, and keeping her life deliberately low profile. But here's the surprising twist. Despite the miles that separated them and the undeniable differences in the way Tiffany was raised compared to her older siblings, her words about her father have always carried warmth, tenderness, and affection. She never painted him as a distant figure or an unreachable icon, but rather as a man with a lighter, softer side, funny, caring, and loving in his own way. While their time together might not have matched the closeness seen in other families, Tiffany has always been firm in her belief that their bond was genuine and unstrained. In her own words, she once reassured the world, "We see each other as much as possible. And of course, we talk on the phone." Those simple words reveal something deeper, that behind the public image of a larger-than-life political figure, to Tiffany, he was still simply her father. No matter the distance, I don't think it ever caused strain in our relationship. It's a fascinating perspective, isn't it? From the outside, it would be easy to assume the miles created distance in their bond. Yet Tiffany never felt it that way. For her life with Marla gave her a peaceful, loving, and grounded childhood, far removed from the frenzy of the Trump name. And though that made her stand out as a different kind of Trump, it also gave her something priceless, a sense of independence her siblings may never fully understand. And while Tiffany's chapter unfolded quietly, the story of Donald Trump and Melania was just beginning, and it started like something out of a movie. It was September 1998 at the Kit Kat Club, a glamorous Manhattan hotspot. Melania had been in the U.S. for only 2 years, chasing her modeling dreams after leaving Slovenia. She was radiant, standing amid the glitter when Donald noticed her. Never shy about going after what he wanted, he asked for her phone number. But Melania, calm and confident, flipped the script, asking for his instead. That small gesture was just the first sign of the quiet power that would define her place in Donald's life for decades to come. As her relationship with Donald Trump advanced rapidly, Melania suddenly found herself stepping into an entirely different world. She was no longer just Donald's glamorous girlfriend, but a woman walking into a family that had already been firmly established long before her arrival. Donald's children were no longer little kids in need of bedtime stories or constant care. They were adults, independent with their own lives, their own rhythms, and their own sense of belonging. In some ways, this made things easier. There were no custody battles, no exhausting late-night debates about parenting. Yet for Melania, this presented a more delicate challenge: to find her place in a family where she was not expected to become a mother, but where she still needed to belong. And let's be honest, handling Donald himself, a powerful man with an iron will, was already a challenge. But stepping into a family whose children carried deep-rooted habits, long-standing bonds, and unspoken expectations was another trial altogether. Among these relationships, one stood out in particular: Melania's bond with Tiffany Trump. Unlike Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, who were already grown when Melania came into Donald's life, Tiffany was only 6 years old when the couple began dating. To make matters more complicated, Tiffany lived in California with her mother, Marla Maples, far from the tightly knit Trump circle in New York. That distance could have created an emotional gap. Yet Melania, perhaps sensing Tiffany's vulnerability, refused to let her feel like an outsider, a child who didn't quite belong to the family. One touching example came in the year 2000. A photograph captured Melania warmly smiling, holding little Tiffany, then just 7 years old, in a tight embrace at a tennis match while Donald sat nearby watching the game. It was such a simple moment, yet it spoke volumes. Melania wasn't merely Donald's girlfriend tagging along to an event. She was reaching out, showing warmth, and making herself truly present. That connection was perhaps exactly what Tiffany needed. Having a famous father who was constantly away, consumed by business and later politics, could make a child feel invisible in her own family. But Melania wanted Tiffany to know she mattered, that she had a place, regardless of how complicated her parents' relationship might have been. But the story does not end with the women. Tiffany's bond with her half-siblings has always carried its own intrigue. Outsiders often assume that growing up on the West Coast with her mother made Tiffany feel like an outsider to the New York-centered Trump clan. Yet those who truly know insist the opposite is true. The Trump siblings, despite their separate upbringings, share a quiet but genuine harmony. It may not always be broadcast on social media, but beneath the surface there is closeness. This became unmistakable at the 2024 Republican National Convention, where Tiffany stood shoulder to shoulder with her siblings in a way she never had before. In past years, she faded quietly into the background. This time she was fully present, and that presence spoke of a new role within the family. Meanwhile, Ivanka has begun to step back from politics, while Don Jr. and Eric remain in the spotlight. It seems Tiffany is gradually stepping into a larger space, perhaps influenced by her deepening bond with Melania. And Melania herself is a puzzle. Unlike the rest of the Trumps, she is elusive, guarded, speaking rarely and carefully. Donald once admitted in a 2023 interview that his wife deliberately avoids the glare because the media can be ruthless. Yet even in her quietness, Melania holds undeniable weight within the family. That in itself makes her relationship with Tiffany all the more fascinating. In a family where image is everything, the sight of Melania and Tiffany together, not in staged photo ops, but in candid, relaxed, authentic moments, speaks louder than any speech. With Tiffany preparing for motherhood, their bond seems to deepen further. Perhaps it is because Melania knows firsthand the weight of raising a child under the blinding Trump spotlight, and now she sees Tiffany stepping into that same journey. Or perhaps it is simply an unspoken understanding, a silent thread of empathy binding them. Whatever it is, it feels real, something far beyond the polished facade the Trumps often display. And in a family where personal life and politics are so tightly interwoven, such authenticity is rare, almost precious. If you think the Trump family drama has already peaked, think again. Because Tiffany at 31 is ready to speak. For years, whispers and speculations circled around her bond with Melania. Now she is ready to put truth into words. So grab your popcorn, because what Tiffany has revealed is not just unexpected, it is explosive. For too long, she was cast as the forgotten child of Trump. But the truth finally is coming to light. Unlike Ivanka, who was a constant presence throughout Donald Trump's presidency, appearing at countless events, giving speeches, and embodying the polished face of the Trump dynasty, Tiffany lived a life almost in the shadows. She rarely spoke in public, seldom attended White House events, and often seemed absent from the picture entirely. This silence, of course, fueled speculation. Was something wrong within the family? Was she deliberately being kept at a distance? And what about Melania, the elegant and enigmatic First Lady? Was she perhaps the one ensuring Tiffany stayed away from the spotlight? Rumors spread quickly, especially when whispers emerged that Tiffany had gone months without speaking to her father. What deepened the perception of her distance was the fact that Tiffany was primarily raised by her mother, Marla Maples. The media often branded her as the other daughter, the one outside Ivanka's inner circle, the one who didn't quite belong in the carefully curated image of a flawless billionaire family. Unlike Ivanka, who seamlessly aligned herself with the Trump empire, Tiffany seemed to drift a name on the family tree, but not truly part of the dynasty's core narrative. Even Trump's biographer Gwenda Blair noted that Tiffany often appeared set apart from her siblings as though she lived in a world of her own. Such observations only strengthened the assumption that Tiffany and Melania had little connection. After all, if Tiffany herself wasn't fully invested in the Trump brand, why would Melania, a first lady known for her reserve, invest her time in building closeness with her? But here's the truth, those assumptions couldn't be more wrong. Behind closed doors, Tiffany and Melania share a far warmer bond than the public ever realized. Despite the swirling gossip, Melania made sure Tiffany always felt included, whether in private family gatherings or milestone moments. And when Tiffany began planning her wedding to Michael Boulos, Melania stepped forward in ways that surprised many. Quietly yet meaningfully, she played a supportive role in the background. That experience brought the two women closer, revealing a relationship not of distance or cold formality, but of genuine connection. It proved that their bond was never about appearances, it was real, heartfelt, and far deeper than anyone had imagined. So why is Tiffany choosing to open up now after so many years of silence? The answer lies in the changes in her own life. At 31, Tiffany has stepped into a new chapter. She is married, building a future of her own, and looking ahead at the possibility of starting a family. These milestones, moments that carry so much weight, often make us reflect on where we came from, on the ties that shaped us, and on the bonds we sometimes took for granted. For Tiffany, it has been a time of deep reflection. She now sees her family with clearer eyes, acknowledging just how layered and complicated the Trump family dynamics truly are. And in doing so, she has found the courage to affirm something that many doubted: her connection with Melania was never broken, never fake, but instead genuine and enduring. But Tiffany's voice is not only about her personal journey, it is also about timing. The Trump family itself is shifting. With Ivanka stepping away from the public spotlight and choosing a quieter life beyond politics, a space has opened. And into that space, Tiffany has quietly stepped forward. She is present in ways she never was before, joining family gatherings, becoming more visible in the public eye, and proving that she is not the forgotten or distant daughter people once assumed her to be. Her presence is no longer in the shadows. It is undeniable. And that is why now is the right moment, the perfect moment for her to finally clear the air, to address the rumors, and to set the record straight once and for all. We hope Tiffany's truth gives clarity not only to the family story, but also to those who have followed her journey with curiosity and doubt. This is just the beginning of a new chapter. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. And if you're ready for the next untold chapter, simply click the video that's waiting for you on your screen. More and more of Donald Trump's children are stepping into the political spotlight, actively shaping and supporting his campaign. Now his second youngest daughter, Tiffany Trump, has also entered the scene, lending her voice and presence to the effort. Recently, she made heartfelt visits to Republican headquarters in Philadelphia and its surrounding suburbs, where she personally thanked the volunteers who have been tirelessly supporting her father. For Tiffany, who once admitted that she had only given a few speeches in front of classrooms, standing before an audience of over 10 million people was nothing short of overwhelming, a leap into uncharted territory. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. Tiffany Trump has always been the quietest of the Trump children, living in the shadows, while Ivanka Jr. and Eric thrived in the public eye. She preferred silence over spectacle, distance over dominance. Yet now she finds herself unexpectedly caught in a storm of family politics, stunned by a shocking move from her father, Donald Trump. What exactly did he do? Was it family betrayal, a strategic political move, or something deeply personal? Let's uncover the truth behind this decision and why it could change Tiffany's life forever. For much of her life, Tiffany lived on the edge of the Trump empire, close enough to belong, yet distant enough to follow her own path. Unlike Ivanka Jr. and Eric, who dove headfirst into business and politics, she kept herself deliberately apart. But a sudden, shocking development has upended her balance and now threatens to reshape her future. After years of carefully navigating loyalty to her father while pursuing her own ambitions, Donald Trump's recent move hit like a thunderclap. Let's return to Tiffany's story. While her siblings became central figures in Donald Trump's company's campaigns and political battles, Tiffany quietly built a life almost apart from it all. She pursued education independence and an identity beyond the Trump name. Yet now she faces a bitter reality: her father may be pushing her further to the margins. This was evident when she enrolled at Georgetown Law in 2017. For many, it seemed a deliberate choice, her way of stepping out of the Trump spotlight. Instead of joining the family business or political phrase, she embraced law, focusing on criminal justice reform and cyber law, a bold path that showed her determination to be more than just a famous last name. Imagine entering a classroom where half the students already have opinions about you. That was Tiffany's reality. Instead of relying on her family's fame, she dedicated herself to her studies, taking on leadership roles like co-leading the Cyber Law Society and working as a research assistant for Professor Sean Hopwood, a former bank robber turned celebrated law professor and advocate for criminal justice reform. Tiffany's choice of mentor reflected her ideals. She wasn't chasing power for its own sake, but carving a space where her voice and convictions could stand on their own. This is a side of Tiffany Trump few expected. While many see her as a privileged heiress living off her family name, she has devoted herself to serious legal work, a path of discipline, sacrifice, and conviction. At times, her contributions even contrasted with her father's politics, including participating in discussions that shaped the First Step Act, one of the Trump administration's notable bipartisan achievements. Tiffany wasn't merely living in her father's shadow. She was leaving her own mark on meaningful issues. Yet despite these accomplishments, Tiffany has never fully been welcomed into the Trump empire's inner circle. She has always been something of an outsider present, but never truly at the center. Unlike her siblings raised in Trump Tower and groomed to inherit the family business, Tiffany grew up on the West Coast with her mother, Marla Maples. Her childhood wasn't filled with boardroom strategies or the relentless chase of political power. That difference made her stand apart, and in the Trump world, standing apart often meant being on the margins. Insiders sometimes whispered that Tiffany was the odd one, out the daughter who didn't quite fit the mold. She didn't grow up in boardrooms or follow her father through the corridors of real estate and politics. Instead, California gave her a childhood far removed from the Trump brand. This distance became clearer during her legal studies, where her mentor, Hossein Fetni, noted her genuine passion for human rights and commitment to addressing legal challenges faced by minority communities, causes not always aligned with her father's politics. Tiffany's focus was never on family loyalty or image, but on justice, fairness, and carving her own place in a world quick to judge her. Unlike her siblings, Tiffany didn't rush to defend every action of her father, which set her apart. At Georgetown, she faced criticism simply for her last name, with classmates questioning Trump's policies, especially on immigration. Yet Tiffany responded with calm and grace, revealing a quiet strength that left a lasting impression without demanding attention. Rather than argue or justify every decision her father made, Tiffany often chose a softer, wiser approach. Her words might be, "I understand where you're coming from, and I hope we can move forward." It was a subtle, skillful way to navigate an almost impossible situation. Yet no matter how carefully she avoided conflict, Tiffany could never escape the immense shadow of her family name. When she graduated from Georgetown Law in 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, that shadow followed her once again. Like many students that year, Tiffany completed her studies online, missing the traditional commencement she had dreamed of. What drew attention next was Donald Trump publicly claiming she graduated at the top of her class, though Georgetown Law doesn't rank students that way. While Tiffany was indeed accomplished, her GPA wasn't enough to be number one. The moment revealed less about Tiffany's achievements and more about Trump's lifelong habit of exaggeration, even regarding his own daughter. For Tiffany, it was a reminder that no matter her own achievements, she would always be linked, whether she liked it or not, to her father's larger-than-life image. In every famous family, there's often one outsider, the one who doesn't fit the mold. In the Trump dynasty, that has always been Tiffany. While Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric are seen as the heirs building careers tied to their father's legacy, Tiffany has long been viewed as the second daughter, never fully aligned with the family's high-profile, business-driven, politically charged identity. Now, after years of quietly supporting her father, Tiffany is blindsided by a shocking decision from Donald Trump, one that could reshape her place in the family forever. Her role in the Trump dynasty has always been complicated. While her siblings grew up in New York City, immersed in the empire's business world, Tiffany was raised in California with her mother, Marla Maples. Unlike Ivanka, groomed to be a polished public figure and central to the Trump organization, Tiffany was never positioned as a key player. That difference in distance is what makes her story so striking today. Even in the media, Tiffany Trump was rarely called simply Donald Trump's daughter. She was often labeled as the child of his second marriage, a distinction that set her apart. Though factual, the label carried weight, marking her as outside the inner circle. Her name seldom appeared alongside her half-siblings, and when it did, discussions focused on her distance from the core family. Each public appearance brought scrutiny, mockery, or dismissal, as if her presence always needed explaining. Her 2020 Republican National Convention speech is perhaps the clearest example of this divide. While her siblings passionately defended their father's legacy and delivered fiery partisan messages, Tiffany took a different road. Her words were not those of a political soldier, but of a wary observer. She criticized the media not for attacking her father, but for shaping biased narratives that could manipulate public trust. Her message was less about defending Donald Trump and more about cautioning America. It was her way of sidestepping the expectation that she must become just another extension of her father's voice. But did it change how people saw her? Not really. Tiffany was still constantly compared to Ivanka and usually fell short. Ivanka, polished and business-savvy, long considered Donald's favorite. An heir to his empire, played a central role in the Trump organization, the White House, and shaping her father's public image. Tiffany, raised far from Manhattan's skyscrapers and boardrooms, only reinforced the sense that her identity lived in Ivanka's shadow. The whispers grew louder when stories emerged, suggesting that Donald Trump sometimes refused to pose for photos with Tiffany. True or not, those reports reinforced the image of a daughter standing apart, and one whose bond with her father seemed fragile, conditional, and often questioned. For Tiffany, the challenge was never just about public perception. It was about carving out her own identity in a family where legacy and loyalty were everything. A former White House aide once revealed a quiet but piercing remark that Donald Trump never seemed as eager to have Tiffany in family photos as he was when posing with Ivanka. That aide was eventually fired, and Trump rushed to defend his daughter, declaring publicly, "Tiffany is great. I love Tiffany." Yet the very fact that such rumors existed at all spoke volumes. They whispered of an invisible distance of a daughter who, despite her father's powerful name, often seemed to stand just a step outside the frame. Dr. Sam Hafi, a respected psychologist, explained that being constantly compared to Ivanka in the media could leave Tiffany feeling overshadowed, underestimated, even forgotten within her own family. Imagine growing up with the unshakable belief that no matter what you achieve, you will always live in the shadow of the golden child. That relentless pressure may explain why Tiffany has chosen to live her life with such silence, such restraint. For her, privacy became not only a choice, but perhaps a form of survival. Before Donald Trump stormed into politics, Tiffany's life was relatively ordinary, at least as ordinary as it could be for someone with her last name. Biographer Michael D'Antonio noted that she was in some ways shielded from the chaos of her father's business empire and his constant media presence. But the moment Trump launched his presidential campaign, everything shifted. Overnight, Tiffany was pulled into a spotlight she never asked for, under a name that had become one of the most powerful and polarizing in modern history. Unlike her siblings, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric, who were raised inside the protective bubble of the Trump brand and hardened by years of media scrutiny, Tiffany had no such preparation. She had to adapt instantly, thrust into a world of judgment and expectation. D'Antonio described this as an unfair identity, and he was right. While Ivanka and her brothers moved in lockstep with their father's political machine, Tiffany faced a far lonelier challenge: how to balance loyalty to her family with her own dreams, her own voice. Yet Tiffany never stopped striving. Growing up on the edges of the Trump dynasty, she pushed forward, speaking at both of her father's presidential campaigns and earning a law degree from Georgetown. Despite her achievements, she often remained an outsider in her own family, acknowledged but not fully embraced. Tiffany's relationship with Michael Boulos opened a new chapter, a modern fairy tale tinged with politics and billionaire influence. Unlike fleeting summer flings, their bond grew stronger over time. It began in July 2018 on Mykonos, Greece, where Tiffany, vacationing at Lindsay Lohan's beach club, met Michael, heir to a Lebanese-Nigerian business empire. What seemed a brief encounter became the start of something lasting. At first, their relationship stayed private, no flashy Instagram posts, no public announcements. They simply enjoyed each other's company away from the media glare. By September 2018, they stepped into the public eye together at New York Fashion Week. Dating a Trump, however, meant more than dinners or family visits. For Michael, it was entering the complex machinery of the Trump empire itself. Michael's first meetings with Tiffany's family took place at Mar-a-Lago, where every word was weighed and every gesture observed. By Thanksgiving, he had blended into the Trump world, gold interiors, political debates over Turkey, and unmatched scrutiny. Under the pressure, he held his own, winning Tiffany's heart and earning respect within one of the most powerful families in the world. By January 2021, their relationship had reached a turning point. Michael didn't just choose any ordinary setting for his proposal, he chose the White House Rose Garden, one of the most symbolic places in America. They're surrounded by history and grandeur. He slipped a stunning $1.2 million engagement ring onto Tiffany's finger. The moment carried even more weight, happening just a single day before Donald Trump was set to leave office. It wasn't just an engagement, it was a scene drenched in symbolism, blending love politics in the closing of one powerful chapter in her life. That proposal closed Tiffany's chapter as the overlooked youngest daughter and opened a new one. While she and Michael considered destinations from Miami to Greece, they chose Mar-a-Lago not just for its grandeur, but for its meaning. As her mother reminded her, it was Tiffany's birthplace, turning the wedding into more than an event, it was a homecoming. Yet true to the Trump family story, even a wedding could not escape drama. Just days before the ceremony, Hurricane Nicole swept through Florida, forcing Mar-a-Lago to evacuate its staff. Tiffany was left in a state of panic, wondering if her carefully planned wedding would be lost to nature's fury. With 500 guests waiting for news and Palm Beach International Airport temporarily shut down, everything hung in the balance. Then, as if fate intervened, the storm passed and the skies cleared just in time. The wedding was saved. On November 12th, beneath a floral arch that seemed to bloom just for her, Tiffany walked down the aisle in a custom-made Elisab gown. The dress was more than just fabric and design, it was a tribute to Michael's Lebanese heritage, a gesture that spoke of love, unity, and respect for his roots. The wedding became a bridge between two worlds, wealth, politics, and international business intertwined with tradition and romance. In that moment, Tiffany was no longer just the daughter of a former president, she was stepping into her own legacy, the Boulos dynasty. And then came a moment few expected. Donald Trump himself walked his daughter down the aisle and shared a father-daughter dance that felt almost out of place for a family so often defined by public battles and political storms. For one fleeting moment beneath the chandeliers and cameras, there was only a father giving away his daughter and a daughter holding on just a little tighter to her father. It was tender, rare, and achingly human. During the ceremony, Marla Maples, ever the tender, protective mother, bowed her head in prayer, adding warmth to the grandeur. Now, as Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos begin their marriage, they face more than joy, the challenge of uniting two powerful dynasties. For Tiffany, long on the edges of the Trump empire, this wedding marked a turning point, balancing her Trump legacy with her new place in the Boulos family. Tiffany's bond with her half-siblings had always been complicated, shaped by distant upbringing and the restless, larger-than-life personality of their father. While Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric were raised in the very heart of Manhattan's elite circles, surrounded by skyscrapers and society galas, Tiffany grew up thousands of miles away on the West Coast in the quieter, sun-soaked world that Marla Maples had chosen for her daughter. This separation, both physical and emotional, meant Tiffany often felt like an outsider within her own family. She never quite fit the mold of the Trump siblings who moved together like a polished unit. Yet Marla worked tirelessly to ensure her daughter never felt abandoned. She encouraged Tiffany to stay connected, urging her to attend family gatherings and to celebrate milestones, no matter the miles that stretched between them. Marla's devotion built a fragile but enduring bridge between Tiffany and the rest of the Trumps. As Tiffany grew older, things began to shift. Choosing to study at the University of Pennsylvania, like her father and Ivanka, gave her a chance to connect with her siblings. Ivanka especially took on the role of mentor, offering advice, inviting her to events, and slowly drawing her into the Trump inner circle. For Tiffany, it was more than sisterly care. It was a doorway into the family world she once only observed from afar. But behind those carefully polished family portraits, tension quietly lingers in the shadows. No matter how perfect or united the Trump family may appear to the public, Tiffany's place within that glittering empire has always seemed fragile, almost uncertain. Her quieter, more private nature set her apart from the roles her siblings so proudly embraced in their father's vast world of politics and business. The media, always hungry for a story, only amplified this divide, painting Tiffany as the outsider in a dynasty that thrives on the spotlight. Whispers suggest Donald Trump never pictured Tiffany in the same spotlight as Ivanka. Leaks from former White House staff reinforce this view, hinting he was reluctant to place her in the family's power circle. Ironically, when he tried to show public affection, it only fueled doubt. Was it real love or just damage control? And then comes the quiet question, where does Melania fit in? The Trump family, like many blended ones, carries its own complexities. Tiffany's bond with her stepmother has always been distant, neither hostile nor close, so unlike Donald's warm, visible ties with Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric. Tiffany seems to orbit on the edges, careful to avoid the family's political and business storm. From what has been visible to the public, Tiffany and Melania maintain a cordial, almost formal connection, respectful, polite, and carefully balanced. They have never shown signs of open conflict, but neither have they displayed the kind of intimacy that makes headlines. Their relationship remains suspended in that gray space, neither close nor distant enough to define. And perhaps that more than anything else speaks volumes about Tiffany's delicate position within America's most scrutinized family. Despite the invisible walls within the Trump family, Melania still sought to bring Tiffany closer. During Tiffany's wedding preparations, she even joined the bachelorette party in Palm Beach, standing beside Marla Maples to celebrate. It was a rare, almost cinematic moment, past and present united in harmony, where the quiet strength of their bond seemed to take shape. Like Tiffany, Melania was often seen as an outsider in the Trump dynasty. While Ivanka stood at the center as her father's confidant and polished public face, Melania moved cautiously, stepping forward only when needed, retreating when silence spoke louder. Between her and Tiffany existed an unspoken bond. Both knew what it meant to watch the Trump empire from its edges, living beside it rather than within. Melania herself once addressed, albeit gently, the layered challenges of navigating her relationship with Donald Trump's older children. In her memoir, she admitted that family bonds are often complicated and disagreements are a natural part of family life. It was a subtle but telling way of acknowledging that life inside such a powerful household is not always smooth, not always easy. The Trump family, like any family, is marked by frictions and reconciliations, distance and closeness threads that together weave the fabric of their private world. And yet, despite quiet tensions, Melania and Tiffany preserved a bond built on respect. At Tiffany's wedding to Michael Boulos, both Melania and Marla Maples appeared together, a subtle reminder that coexistence, even between women with different roles in Donald Trump's life, could be graceful. Away from the spotlight, these moments spoke of strength, understanding, and peace over rivalry. What makes this relationship even more compelling is the stark contrast between Tiffany's upbringing and that of her half-siblings. While Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric grew up immersed in their father's towering career, surrounded by skyscrapers, boardrooms, and political campaigns, Tiffany's childhood unfolded on the West Coast, far from the relentless rhythm of the Trump machine. She lived in a world that felt almost opposite, quieter, freer, less scripted. This distance shaped not just her identity, but also the unique bond she would later form with Melania, a woman who in her own way also knew what it meant to stand apart. This shared experience, though marked by a sense of distance, may explain the quiet bond between Tiffany and Melania. Their connection seems less like a traditional stepmother-stepdaughter closeness and more like an unspoken understanding between two women who both in different ways have found themselves slightly apart from the inner circle of the Trump dynasty. It is a bond not built on daily intimacy, but rather on silent recognition, a subtle empathy for each other's place in a world dominated by Donald Trump's towering presence. But as Donald Trump plots every move with his political future in mind, Tiffany's role grows increasingly fragile. While Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric are thrust forward to carry his image and legacy, Tiffany remains quieter, balancing loyalty to her family, with her longing for independence loved yet never truly central. Now, as she begins a new chapter of her life with Michael Boulos, Tiffany's connection to the Trump legacy may only grow more complicated. Will she continue to remain in the background, living her life apart from the political theater? Or will she be pulled into a more defined, visible role in the family story? The truth is, Tiffany Trump's story is still being written, and the next chapters may hold unexpected turns. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. And if you're curious to hear even more shocking stories, simply click on the next video waiting for you on screen. It is truly a privilege to stand here tonight with all of you and share a few heartfelt words about my father. Donald Trump has never done anything halfway, and in my own moments of struggle, his unwavering support and care have always been there for me. For so long, Tiffany Trump chose silence. No scandals, no social media explosions, just a quiet life lived in the vast shadow of the Trump empire. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. But then came the sudden divorce, and that silence finally cracked. Whispers of a troubled marriage, rumors of hidden power struggles, and even a mysterious real estate deal began to swirl, fueling speculation like wildfire. And now, for the very first time, Tiffany speaks. What really happened behind those closed doors? And why does it feel as though this is only the beginning? Before we dive deep into the unfolding drama, let's pause to understand Tiffany, the most private, the most mysterious member of the Trump dynasty. Unlike her siblings, Tiffany was always a little apart, and perhaps that has always been the heart of the mystery. She isn't an enigma because of scandal, but because we know so little about her. While her brothers and sister basked in the spotlight, soaking up luxury and fame, Tiffany hovered quietly on the edges, neither fully in the glare of family fame, nor entirely detached from it. Born in 1993, Tiffany is the daughter of Donald Trump and his second wife, actress Marla Maples. From the very beginning, she was raised differently than her siblings. While Ivanka, Eric, and Don Jr. were immersed in the Trump world from the very start, Tiffany grew up under the California sun, far from the family's fortress in New York. Her mother was determined to give her as normal and grounded a childhood as possible, despite having a billionaire father. Tiffany was never simply ushered into the Trump organization like her siblings. Her bond with her father was distant. She spent most of her childhood with her mother, only appearing occasionally at family gatherings or at Trump Tower, where she often stood out as different. While her siblings carried themselves like heirs apparent future CEOs in the making, Tiffany revealed a softer, more creative side. As a teenager, she even ventured into music, releasing a pop song titled Like a Bird. Though the song never became a major success, it revealed Tiffany's desire to carve her own path beyond the Trump name. When that dream faded, she chose a different road: college. She enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania, following in the footsteps of her father and Ivanka. But Tiffany's experience was far from the same. She wasn't chasing business or political ambition. She lived like an ordinary student, making friends outside the elite social circles and savoring the true college experience. And when graduation came, Tiffany made a choice that set her apart even further. She pursued law at Georgetown. While her siblings chased real estate empires and political influence, Tiffany remained private, focused on her studies, and carefully stayed clear of unnecessary drama. Unlike her father and siblings, Tiffany rarely sought attention. She never courted controversy, nor did she try to craft a larger-than-life public persona. Even though she worked hard to build her own identity, she could never fully escape the Trump legacy. Whether she liked it or not, being part of the Trump dynasty meant living under constant expectations, endless assumptions, and the unrelenting question of where she truly belonged. Just as Tiffany seemed to have settled quietly into the Trump orbit, she made a move that shocked the public. A billionaire fiancé, a lavish wedding at Mar-a-Lago, and a romance that seemed pulled straight from the pages of an elite fairy tale. Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos, a love story written in the language of high society. For years, Tiffany had remained an enigma, balancing delicately between the dazzling Trump empire and the quieter simplicity of her private life. But everything changed when she met Michael Boulos. Suddenly, Tiffany was no longer the forgotten daughter of Donald Trump. She became engaged to a billionaire heir, stepping into a world even more exclusive than the one she had been born into. So who exactly is Michael Boulos, and how did this high society romance truly begin? Michael is far from the typical Trump suitor. He isn't a Wall Street tycoon, nor a power-hungry politician. Instead, he comes from a fortune built far beyond America's borders, untouched by Manhattan's glitter. Born in Houston in 1997 but raised in Lagos, Nigeria, Michael is the son of Lebanese business magnates who built vast wealth in West Africa. His family controls Boulos Enterprises and SCOA Nigeria companies, with sprawling interests ranging from motorcycles to heavy machinery. In short, Michael grew up surrounded by staggering wealth, but his privilege wasn't the reality TV kind of riches. It was the quiet, commanding kind, built on real influence behind the scenes. Despite being raised in a billionaire dynasty, Michael never fit the stereotype of a trust fund heir flaunting wealth online. Instead, he is educated, ambitious, and polished, a stark contrast to the noisy, flashy world Tiffany had known all her life. Unlike the Trump brand, where attention is everything, Michael's family thrives in discretion, making their influence all the more formidable. Which raises the question, how did a billionaire from Nigeria ever cross paths with a Trump heiress? That's where the story turns fascinating. It all began with a chance encounter at an elite playground where the worlds of wealth, power, and legacy effortlessly collide. The romance of Tiffany and Michael was born in a setting that could not have been more perfectly Trump. A glittering summer night in Mykonos, Greece. Yes, Mykonos, the playground of the ultra-wealthy, where super yachts line the turquoise shores and billionaires sip champagne as if it were water. It was the summer of 2018, and Tiffany, freshly graduated from law school, was reveling in the privileges of youth and fortune, traveling abroad on holiday. Though far more reserved than her siblings, she had no trouble slipping seamlessly into the rarefied circles of the world's elite. And then Michael Boulos appeared. The exact details of their first encounter remain scarce, but insiders say sparks flew instantly. They were introduced through mutual friends, because in that world, everyone knows everyone. Unlike the fleeting romances that tabloids had once tied to her family, Tiffany's connection with Michael felt entirely different. There were no flashing cameras, no staged public declarations, just two young heirs quietly enjoying each other's company. What set Michael apart from Tiffany's past relationships was his refinement, sophistication, and understated charm. He wasn't merely a New York socialite. Michael had been raised with a global perspective, immersed in multiple cultures, and had built a powerful network that stretched far beyond the walls of Trump Tower. For Tiffany, who had always felt like an outsider within her own family, Michael's world offered both a refreshing escape and a rise in status. Unlike most summer romances, theirs did not fade once the holidays ended. In fact, it only deepened. By the fall of 2018, Michael had already been introduced to the closest members of the Trump family. Just think about it, Tiffany, the daughter who once lingered quietly on the sidelines of her powerful family, suddenly found herself standing at the threshold of something entirely new. For years, she had been the Trump who was present, yet distant, visible, yet not fully woven into the fabric of her family's empire. And now she was preparing to welcome into her life not just any partner, but Michael Boulos, a billionaire heir with a vast global business empire stretching from Nigeria to Europe. This wasn't just romance, it was a declaration of intent, a bold crossing of boundaries that would inevitably draw attention. Michael did not stumble into Tiffany's world awkwardly. Instead, he slipped in with a kind of quiet confidence that made it seem as though he had always belonged there. He was photographed at Trump's glittering, high-profile events, standing beside Tiffany, as though he had been by her side for years. More than that, he met Donald Trump himself, an introduction that was more than personal. It was symbolic, almost ceremonial signaling that Tiffany's private choices could no longer remain entirely separate from the Trump legacy. And perhaps the most surprising twist of all, Donald Trump himself, a man notorious for guarding his inner circle with near impenetrable walls, seemed to welcome Michael with open arms. For decades, Trump had been skeptical of anyone trying to edge closer to the family, yet somehow Michael managed to pass through every unspoken test. Maybe it was the dazzling scale of his fortune, the reach of his family's empire stretching across borders, or perhaps the simple fact that he was not Jared Kushner. Whatever the reason, Michael carved out a space of his own, firmly rooted in Trump's carefully guarded orbit. And as the relationship blossomed, Tiffany, once the quiet, almost invisible daughter, began to glow under the spotlight in ways the world had never seen before. She wasn't just standing beside Michael. She was stepping into a version of herself that had long been waiting to emerge. She appeared more and more frequently at White House functions, her presence no longer quiet or tentative, but radiant and assured. Standing proudly beside her father at campaign rallies, she was no longer the forgotten Trump daughter watching from afar. Tiffany had stepped into the spotlight. She began to speak up, smile brighter, and carry herself with a newfound sense of belonging that many had never seen in her before. Michael seemed to play a pivotal role in this transformation. He gave her not just affection, but also the kind of confidence and grounding she had always struggled to find within her powerful family. For the first time, Tiffany looked as though she belonged to something bigger, both by blood and by choice. By the dawn of 2021, subtle glances at her left hand, whispers in political corridors, and quiet speculation in society columns all hinted at the same thing: an engagement was on the horizon. Tiffany, who had always kept her relationships private, was now part of something Michael insisted be made public. On January 19, 2021, the very last day of her father's presidency, Tiffany announced on Instagram that she was engaged. The timing was impossible to miss. As one chapter of her life closed, another began, one that promised stability, glamour, and perhaps more power than she had ever known. Michael's proposal was nothing short of a spectacle, a dazzling 12-carat diamond ring glittering with a price tag of over $1 million. In their world, extravagance wasn't just a choice, it was an expectation. Bigger meant better, and this ring was the perfect symbol of that belief. Yet even as Tiffany proudly displayed her sparkling engagement, making headlines across magazines and social media feeds, the whispers refused to fade. People speculated in hushed tones: was this truly a story of love, conquering all, or merely a carefully calculated alliance between two dynasties of staggering wealth and influence? The question lingered, turning their fairy tale into something far more complex, a union scrutinized under the unforgiving spotlight of fame and fortune. Others believed that Tiffany, long cast as the outsider of the Trump family, was finally claiming her own power. Regardless of the speculation, wedding plans were already underway, transforming a sunlit Mykonos romance into preparations for a royal-scale celebration at Mar-a-Lago. And when Tiffany Trump finally walked down the aisle there, it was clear this was no ordinary wedding. It was nothing short of a spectacle, a dazzling display of grandeur, luxury, and the unmistakable Trump signature of power and style. After all, when the daughter of a former president says "I do it," is destined to be a moment that will echo far beyond the walls of the estate. On November 12, 2022, Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos exchanged vows in front of their closest family and friends at the Trump family's legendary Palm Beach estate. But in the Trump world, intimate takes on an entirely different meaning. The guest list read like a roll call of the elite, from influential politicians to international business leaders. And the setting itself, Mar-a-Lago, with its lavish architecture and storied history, was the perfect backdrop for such a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. Towering palm trees swayed against the ocean breeze, grand ballrooms shimmered with light, and the estate's sweeping waterfront views transformed the night into a vision of elegance. Every detail was a masterstroke of planning. Pastel-colored arrangements filled the air with softness, while golden accents and glittering crystal chandeliers heightened the sense of timeless sophistication. It was more than decoration, it was a stage set for history. And then there was Tiffany. Her gown was breathtaking, a creation that spoke not only to beauty, but to meaning. Designed as a tribute to her husband's Lebanese heritage, the dress featured intricate beadwork, delicate sheer sleeves, and a flowing train that seemed to glide like water. It was a blend of timeless elegance and modern grace. Tiffany's bridal look was both classic and refreshingly original, a reflection of her own identity, graceful yet never overshadowed by her family's name. One of the most unforgettable moments was when Donald Trump himself walked his daughter down the aisle, a rare emotional public display that revealed a softer side of the former president. Tiffany's mother, Marla Maples, was deeply involved in the planning, making sure the day was both heartfelt and grand. Tiffany's siblings, Ivanka, Eric, and Donald Jr., were all present impeccably dressed, smiling warmly before the cameras projecting the image of a united family. Michael Boulos, the groom, came from a wealthy business family with strong ties to Nigeria and Lebanon, making the wedding a fascinating blend of cultures. The guest list glittered with politicians, business moguls, and international elites from both family circles. This was not just a celebration of love, it was the merging of two powerful dynasties with global influence. Although the Trump name carried heavy political weight, this moment was meant to be private, not political. It was a celebration of Tiffany and Michael's journey together, a rare pause for the family to savor without the shadows of politics. Behind the grandeur, however, the essence of the day remained simple: two people beginning a new chapter just wrapped in sparkle and luxury. Yet whispers began to emerge even then, subtle cracks in the marriage that outsiders could only speculate about. What truly happened? The strain of living in a high-profile marriage is undeniable. Everyone knows Tiffany Trump and Michael Boulos have not officially separated, at least not publicly. And yet rumors swirl. Speculations about their relationship continue to circulate. While no solid evidence points to a split, the constant chatter leaves people wondering, have they drifted apart, and if so, why Tiffany may not be as politically visible as her father or siblings. But being a Trump means living under relentless scrutiny, with every smile, every silence, every gesture becoming fuel for public debate. Michael was born into a powerful business dynasty, a family whose name carried weight and influence. Marrying into such a household is never just about love. It is also about managing expectations, honoring family legacies, and withstanding the relentless gaze of the public. The constant demand to project perfection, to balance the needs of family, and to endure the scrutiny of the media can place enormous strain even on the strongest of unions. Michael's circumstances make his story even more unique. Born into a wealthy Nigerian-Lebanese family, he grew up in a world far removed from Tiffany's privileged yet distinctly American upbringing. Both come from immense wealth, but the cultural roots and lifestyles that shape them are strikingly different. To marry someone from another culture is to open the door to discovery and growth, an experience that is both enriching and deeply fascinating. Yet such cultural blending does not come without challenges. Differences in family expectations, traditions, and career ambitions can gradually create tension over time. On top of that, Tiffany and Michael have often lived on opposite sides of the globe. Michael's business ventures are deeply tied to Nigeria and international projects, requiring him to travel constantly, while Tiffany is primarily rooted in the United States. This distance, both cultural and geographical, can test even the deepest bonds of love. Their relationship is said to have begun when Tiffany was still studying law, while Michael was busy managing his family's business overseas. They already had some experience with long-distance love, but marriage is a far heavier matter. Living apart for long stretches in two different countries can put a serious strain on any couple. And coming from such powerful families, there's always the lingering question: how much do family pressure and expectations shape their choices? The Trump family has long been known for being tightly knit in both business and private life, while Michael's family has its own empire to protect. Could outside family pressures or even conflicting business interests eventually cause cracks in their marriage? And then, of course, there was the lavish wedding at Mar-a-Lago. A wedding may be a dazzling celebration, but marriage itself is a daily commitment, far less glamorous and far more demanding. When the glitter fades and real life sets in, couples are often forced to confront the challenges of daily reality. Will Tiffany and Michael struggle with the everyday truths of married life once the excitement wears off? Quite possibly. Even the most picture-perfect couples face private hardships. Of course, this is speculation, but if Tiffany and Michael were to part ways, these could very well be some of the reasons behind it. Beyond the pressures of marriage itself, Tiffany also faces challenges within her own family, especially with her father. So what is really happening between Tiffany and Donald Trump? Tiffany Trump and Donald Trump, a father-daughter relationship marked by complexity. Unlike Ivanka, Eric, and Donald Jr., who were raised deep inside their father's empire and constantly shielded by him, Tiffany's journey to adulthood has been strikingly different. As the only daughter of Donald Trump and Marla Maples, Tiffany grew up primarily with her mother in California, far from the glittering lights, immense pressure, and towering expectations of Trump Tower. Although she carried the Trump name her entire life, reports often describe her relationship with her father as distant, even strained at times, surrounded by speculation about a bond that has always been more complicated than it appeared. Unlike her siblings, who eagerly threw themselves into their father's world of high-stakes business and relentless politics, Tiffany remained noticeably on the margins. Sources suggest there were long stretches when she and Donald barely spoke, sometimes going months without meaningful contact. And the truth is, in a family built upon legacy, loyalty, an empire standing apart often makes everything infinitely more complicated. Tiffany herself has spoken with rare honesty about this unusual bond. "I don't know what it feels like to have a typical father. He wasn't the dad who would take me to the beach and swim with me, but he was deeply inspiring in his own way." Beyond the physical distance, their contrasting worldviews only deepen the complexity of their father-daughter relationship. The Trump family is famously rooted in conservative values, with Donald at the helm of a political movement built upon traditional beliefs. Tiffany, however, often leaned toward a freer, more liberal outlook. Her relationships and activities sometimes diverged from the family's rigid conservative image, fueling constant whispers of quiet tension behind closed doors. For instance, her appearances at events outside the family's usual circle stirred controversy and raised eyebrows. These ideological differences carried the weight of unspoken strain, especially in a dynasty that prizes unity and loyalty above all else. Adding to the intrigue are persistent rumors that Tiffany may one day step away entirely from the Trump organization's real estate empire. At first glance, it might seem like nothing more than an ordinary real estate decision. Yet in truth, the symbolism behind it carries far deeper meaning. The Trump empire is not what it once was. Since leaving the White House in 2021, Donald Trump's businesses have been entangled in legal battles, pressed under financial scrutiny, and shadowed by a shifting public image. The once glittering Trump brand, a symbol of power and luxury, has undeniably begun to fade. And for Tiffany Trump, the daughter who always seemed to stand with one foot in and one foot out, this may be the perfect moment to quietly step away. In a move layered with symbolism, the iconic jewelry brand Tiffany & Company has vacated a Trump-owned property in New York City. Since 2018, Tiffany & Co. had leased retail space at 6 East 57th Street, one of Trump Organization's prized buildings, while their legendary Fifth Avenue flagship store underwent renovation. Their departure marks more than just a change in commercial leasing. It reflects a larger shift within the Trump empire itself in the post-presidency era. This vacant space now underscores the struggle of Trump Organization to hold on to prestigious tenants amid a turbulent market. In many ways, it mirrors Tiffany Trump herself, unpredictable, elusive, never fully committed, yet never entirely detached. The question now lingers: could this be the defining moment when Tiffany chooses to part ways once and for all? If whispers of her split from Michael Boulos prove true, and if she truly distances herself from the family's business empire, then perhaps, just perhaps, Tiffany is finally ready to live life on her own terms for the very first time. What do you think? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For more exclusive updates like this one, be sure to click on the next video waiting for you on